people don't know that anything exists outside of quick fix weight loss dieting. And we've been so
Yeah.
indoctrinated into that quick fix diet culture. And we've been told for so long that our worth and value is measured by the scale, that smaller equals healthier, and that conflation of
Yeah.
health with size, that there's morality attached to food, that certain foods
Yeah.
are good or bad, and there's morality attached to us
Mm.
when we eat food. Whole30 talks about food and your body and your relationship with food in a totally different way. And we acknowledge that people want so much more.
Hello, Melissa. I am so excited to meet you. Thank you so much for doing this with me today.
I have been looking forward to this for a few months now, so I'm excited to be here. Thanks for
Oh,
having me.
you're so sweet. I have to say I am so incredibly impressed with you. First of all, I love all that you do with Whole30. There's so many threads to pull of how it's very similar to a lot of Ayurvedic principles, which we'll talk about. But, I just messaged you on Instagram and we started talking and I was so surprised that it was you who responded to me, given how many people you are in contact with like on a daily basis. And you messaged me right back and I invited you to be on the podcast and you're like, absolutely yes. And you said it like right away after two, exchanges back and forth. So thank you so much. I'm just so in awe of you. So thank you for doing that.
Oh, thank you. One of the things you'll learn about me is that I say what I mean. So if you get an
I appreciate that.
absolutely yes, you know that I 100% mean it and I am not going to
Yeah.
show up like resentfully or begrudgingly. And if I
Yeah.
can't do it, I will tell you no. Clearly and
Yeah.
kindly. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely. You said absolutely yes, and I'm getting on a plane tomorrow, but let's do it,
Yeah.
when we book this. So, anyway, I am so excited to talk to you. I've been following your work for a while, and I mean, who wouldn't know about what Whole30 is if you're in the health and wellness world? And so, I know that you've talked about it before, but I would really love, just to get an idea from you of like, how did you come up with this idea of Whole30? Because when you came up with it, how many years has it been now? Like 10, 15 years?
15.
15 years. Okay.
Hmm.
I mean, 15 years ago, it was pretty revolutionary. This idea of an elimination sort of, diet and that sort of perspective. Not a lot of people were talking about it unless you were in integrative medicine or functional medicine, the world that I live in. So, how did you get this idea to do this?
Well, it really started off as a two-person self-experiment. I was really into CrossFit at the time. I had been, to go back even 9 years further, I was in recovery for my drug addiction. I had 9 years in recovery. Fitness and health and nutrition were a really big part of my recovery. And so, I was really into my performance and could I perform better and recover better. And we had
Mhm.
attended a nutrition seminar that a friend of ours had put on talking about some of the potentially inflammatory factors of some foods that you might consider healthy. And
Right.
there's no one size fits all when it comes to diet, you know that,
Sure.
but
Mhm.
different bodies respond to different foods in different ways. And his
Right.
kind of, perspective was that some of the stuff that I might be eating, considering healthy, my whey protein shakes and my low calorie snack packs and my whole grains, may not be working in my body the way that I thought they were. And so,
Mhm.
sitting around after this difficult CrossFit lifting session, I was chatting with a friend of mine. He was like, why don't we try this? Why don't we do this 30-day kind of squeaky clean? We pull all of these things out and just see what happens. And I was
Mhm.
eating Thin Mints at the time, right out of the sleeve, because I had just exercised and I had earned them. And I
Right.
was like, yeah, like, let's do it. When do you want to
Mhm.
start? And he said, let's start right now. And I said, sure.
Mhm.
And that
Mhm.
was really the start of the Whole30. I had such a dramatic transformation in my health, in my
Mhm.
habits, in my relationship with food, in my relationship with
Mhm.
my body and the scale. It was so profoundly and unexpectedly transformative that I decided to write about it on my little CrossFit training blog. And that
Mhm.
in 2009 was the start of what we now know as Whole30 today.
Wow, that's incredible. Because for something like this to take off the way that it did, it's really fascinating to me because I will, prescribe elimination diets all the time to my students and patients. And there's all the hemming and hawing and like, oh my gosh, how am I going to do this? And blah, blah, blah. So it's just so fascinating to me that you were able to create something that just took off like this. What do you think is the reason that it was so popular?
I think there were a couple things. First of all, I was deeply entrenched in the CrossFit community, and that is a
Mm,
community of typically young, privileged, already fitness and health minded individuals. So when you give
Sure.
them a challenge like an elimination diet, which is pull all of these foods out for 30 days very strictly, and see
Mhm.
how it improves all of these different factors, they
Sure.
were already primed to say,
Yeah.
"Yes, I can do this," right? They're already doing really
Yeah.
hard CrossFit workouts. They're already paying attention to your diet. So that was a big piece of
Mhm.
it. I think the
Mhm.
other piece is that we gave so much away for free for so many years. The Whole30 is still available for free. You don't need to buy a single thing to do the program.
Right.
But
Mhm.
giving it away for free allowed me to build community and a really close
Yeah.
connection with my community. It allowed me to test the material. What was
Sure.
resonating with people? What wasn't? Could I say this in a different way to help it stick? What resources did you need to be successful? The first 4 years of
Mhm.
Whole30 was just me hearing people say, I wish I had a shopping list. Okay, I'll make you a shopping list. I wish
Right.
I had a meal template. Okay, I'll work with
Yep.
our RDs and MDs to create a meal template. So
Yeah.
it took off largely via word of mouth because the program was so incredibly effective for the vast
Mhm.
majority of people who completed it. But I
Mhm.
also worked really, really hard to build the resources and the support that I knew
Yeah.
people would need to do something as hard as an elimination diet.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm just nodding yes, 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 because I think this has been my experience too. And I think that's amazing. You did have, a community that was so primed, as you're saying. I mean, people who are into health and fitness and love a challenge on top of that, because I think that's key because they were all CrossFitters
Yeah.
anyway. They love a challenge. And so this was like, okay, let's do it. So even though it was going to be hard, it was like, yeah, I can do this,
Yes.
which is the opposite of what I get from a lot of people. But you saying about, this idea about creating community around, a process, a health initiative, I would say,
Yeah.
is so important. And also giving away the information for free when people don't really understand sort of the principles behind it, or it's very new, right? I feel like that's what I've been sort of doing in Ayurveda for the past 15 years, is really sort of priming the pump and teaching people about these principles. And now Ayurveda is having its, day in the spotlight in a big way. And so suddenly everybody wants to do Ayurveda. But I think that that's really important, is just, sharing what you know and what's worked for you personally, and having that personal sort of experience to share with other people is hugely powerful. It's
It
really
is.
powerful. Yeah.
Especially with things like an elimination diet where people
Mhm.
have such a deeply rooted emotional relationship with food, that's not
Right.
always what they would themselves describe as healthy. And so when you're
Mhm.
asking people to give up foods that they are so used to using for comfort, to self-soothe, to relieve anxiety, to show themselves love, when you're
Mhm.
asking them to give those up for 30 days, you have to provide support. You have to provide
Right.
accountability. You have to provide resources that help you find other ways and create other tools to self soothe and relieve anxiety.
Right.
So, it's not just the fact that it's an elimination diet and we give you a
Right.
list of foods to avoid. Probably because of my background in addiction and recovery, I'm very focused, and my real area of passion in terms of research is habit and behavior change. So there's
Right.
a large aspect of that built into the Whole30 as well, because as we started expanding outside of CrossFit, as
Mhm.
CrossFitters started sending their parents and their
Right.
grandparents and their aunts and uncles to our seminars, we
Sure.
started to realize, okay, now we need to talk to this other vastly different audience. They are not self motivated. They're not perhaps into health and fitness, but they do have these plaguing concerns about their health that
Mhm.
weight loss diets have not addressed, especially the quick
Right.
fix weight loss diets. And they just don't know how, I think, to feel better, but they desperately want to feel better. And that was, I think, the niche that we kind of slotted into starting around 2012.
Right. And so that group of people, that sort of second wave after the CrossFitters, right? That group is more, probably the type of people that I'm seeing every day, in my workshops and seminars and consults, are the people who, are trying to figure out how to take care of themselves better, how they can feel better, right?
Yeah.
And so do you feel like it was really the community support that really was the sort of the key to getting them into the Whole30 sort of mindset?
Community support played a huge role in it. When we
Yeah.
were talking to people about the program and they were like, wow, that sounds hard. I don't know if I can do that. And then I
Right.
would say, here is this enormous suite of resources we have for you. And here are all of these articles and all of these handouts. And here's the community you can join that will be your
Mhm.
accountability partner or your support partner. I think that was a big part of it. I think the other part of it, though, was simply the fact that People don't know that anything exists outside of quick fix weight loss dieting. And we've been so
Yeah.
indoctrinated into that quick fix diet culture. And we've been told for so long that our worth and value is measured by the scale, that smaller equals healthier, and that conflation of
Yeah.
health with size, that there's morality attached to food, that certain foods
Yeah.
are good or bad, and there's morality attached to us
Mm.
when we eat food. Whole30 talks about food and your body and your relationship with food in a totally different way. And we acknowledge that people want so much more than that
Mhm.
number reflected on the scale. They want more energy. They want to sleep better.
Right.
They want to have smoother digestion, clearer skin. They want those aches and pains to go away, the resolution of symptoms, all of those things that lead to such an enormously improved quality of life. I think
Right.
for the first time when people were hearing about Whole30, they were hearing us address that side of things. And I think it was a welcome respite for so many
Mhm.
people to not focus on the scale and weight loss for those 30 days.
Yeah, I think that that's so important because, I actually just had a conversation with somebody else a few weeks ago on this podcast about, body positivity and body image and all of the issues of the conflation of body positivity with diet culture or like making them at odds with each other. Right. And so that was actually one of my questions because, some of the pushback I get sometimes about recommending any kind of an elimination sort of diet or digestive rest or what Western culture has taken Ayurvedic sort of cleanses, seasonal cleanses, and made them into this totally different thing, which they are not. It's about digestive rest. It's not about cleansing your body. That's not the purpose. It's about detoxifying, right? It's a completely different thing, but it's been conflated, right?
Yeah,
So I get a lot of pushback, and people will say, well, you're just promoting more diet culture and disordered eating patterns. How have you dealt with that? I'm sure people say that to you.
they do. And I
Hmm.
would say that the Whole30 is not right for everybody. I would be the first person to say
Yes.
that if you have any history of disordered eating, or even if you're just prone, as we all are with diet culture, an elimination diet that involves strict restriction for a period of
Hmm.
time can create issues even when there were none before. I'm very
Right.
clear about that. So the
Right.
Whole30 may not be for everyone. But
Hmm.
I will say that while it is amazing and wonderful if people are able to work with a healthcare practitioner like you who can craft a specific elimination program
Hmm.
for their health concerns, that's like
Right.
best case scenario. But
Sure.
that requires a lot of privilege. It
Yes.
requires time privilege, financial
Hmm.
privilege, access privilege. Not everyone can work with you. So
Exactly.
the Whole30 can provide a free, a very accessible, and incredibly well supported way for people to do some of this work on their own.
Right.
And again, if you are working with a therapist, if you're working with a healthcare practitioner, I think that's best case scenario. But
Hmm.
we should not limit some of the findings that the Whole30 can bring into your
Right.
life in 45 short days just to people who
Right.
have the privilege to be able to afford it. I
Right.
want this to
No,
be accessible.
yeah, no, I absolutely agree. And I think that, it comes back to support again. It's so, if you're doing it for a specific health concern, and there are a lot of reasons to do a Whole30 elimination diet, Ayurvedic, digestive cleanse, or rest, you need to have somebody who's going to support you through it. I think that that's really important. And again, it can just be an accountability partner or a group of people who are doing it together, right? To keep you
Yeah.
on track. Because as you said, it is very much about having privilege to be able to work with me or you or any healthcare provider to do something like this. And we don't want to limit who gets to do this or who can have access to this program, right? So I think that
Yes.
that's a really good point. Really,
Yeah.
really
And
good point.
we work very, very hard. There will be some people who always say because the Whole30 involves an element of restriction, it is automatically diet culture. I have
Mm,
heard that perspective. I disagree with it. And maybe that's a subject for another podcast. I do not believe all restriction is rooted in diet culture. However,
mhm.
we work very hard to carve a space out that is separate and unique from diet culture. We are not a weight loss diet. We do not talk
Right,
about weight loss or help you lose weight. We don't
right,
share before and after photos. You don't count calories on the Whole30
right.
or restrict calories or track
Mhm.
or log your food. We don't label food as good or bad. There's no
Right,
morality when it comes to food or you when you eat food. So we do carve out, I'd like to think, and we do our best
mhm.
here, a space outside of diet culture for people to explore their
Right,
relationship with food and the foods that
right,
work best for them. But the
Mhm.
element of restriction will always be there because at heart, we are an elimination diet. Like, I can't
Right.
change that.
Right. Well, this comes down to semantics because all the things that you said are the same things that I always have to deal with when we're talking about Ayurveda. Because there is, I always say in Ayurveda, there is no good or bad. There's no such thing in Ayurveda. It's all about what is best for you at a certain time of the year, a certain time of your life, depending on what's going on with you, what imbalances you have. That
Mhm.
it's always going to change. So what could be good for you a year ago is not going to be good for you today. What could have been good for you a week ago may not be good for you today, depending on what's going on for you, right? But I think that, it's really interesting because I feel like so many of the words get conflated in Western culture, especially in health and wellness. So a cleanse means, restriction rather than dietary or digestive rest, right? What we mean in Ayurveda is completely different than what Western culture makes it, right? Restriction has become this synonymous with disordered eating rather than sort of this idea of, you know what? If you don't eat the things that are not working for you, that are maybe making you have the symptoms that you're having, then it's somehow disordered eating, right?
I know. This is what's so challenging is that
Yes,
nobody really knows the thought process going on in someone else's head. And the same
right,
behavior can come
right,
from very healthy or very unhealthy
correct.
motivations. I can go out and run 8 miles, and that might be because running brings me joy and I have so much fun in the sunshine and it feels good to move my
Mhm.
body and it's great for my mental health. Or I can go run 8 miles because I'm punishing myself for what I ate yesterday. And
Correct.
nobody on the outside is going to be able to know that motivation. And I think it's very dangerous when we try to ascribe motivation to somebody else based simply on, especially like their highlight reel on social
Yeah,
media. So
for sure.
I restrict certain foods because they do not work for me. And
Mhm.
I'd rather not walk around with feeling like
Right,
there's an alien in my belly. That to
for
me
sure.
is coming from a very healthy place.
Yeah.
But I think everyone needs to, and I think the Whole30 can help people create that level
Mhm.
of self awareness and change their internal monologue
Right,
around why they're choosing the foods they're choosing.
right, exactly, and it's always that awareness. I always talk about
Mhm.
that, it's conscious awareness. That's what Ayurveda is about, is living consciously, living with awareness of why you're making the choices you're making.
Yes.
That's really where you start, right? And so that's what you're talking about is having this dialogue with yourself of like, why am I making that choice? If I know I don't feel well when I have, let's say, dairy, whatever it is, right? Why am I making this choice to have ice
Yeah.
cream? It's dairy. Why am I doing that? Oh, and you can go through sort of that reflection and that exploration in your head. And that's actually that's part of the healing journey is to have that dialogue with yourself. So I think that's super important. And I love that you said that, you really don't talk about, weight loss, have, before and afters. It's super refreshing for that because there are so many people who will go around saying, well, Whole30 is a diet. I've
Mhm.
heard this all the time. It's like a diet, the way we use the word diet in Western culture rather than diet being what is best suited for you to take in,
Yeah.
right? I use the word diet in the same way that you do, right? It's a nutrition plan that works for you and your health concerns. It's
Yes.
not
But
about taking things away and making things good or bad.
yes, and the word diet, of course, we now only associate with weight loss
Right.
dieting. We assume that
Exactly.
it's caloric restriction, it's deliberate restriction, it's deprivation, it's
Mhm.
hunger. And, when people say Whole30 is a diet, like, yes, it is an elimination diet. They've been around since the 1920s. Many healthcare practitioners still consider them the gold standard for identifying food sensitivities. It is a
Mhm.
diet, yes.
Yes.
And I know that people come to the Whole30 with an intention of losing weight. I know that they do because our surveys tell them that. And I
Mhm.
respect and honor your right to do with your body as you choose.
Right.
And also, we are not going to assist you with deliberate, conscientious weight loss on the Whole30. What we do instead is invite you to take a break from that one particular goal, learn about the way foods work in your
Right.
unique body and the foods that work best for you, and then
Right.
take that information into the rest of your life and apply it as you choose. We are not
Mhm.
prescriptive. We don't tell you how you should eat forever. I'm not even
Right.
going to tell you if you know dairy doesn't agree with you, don't ever eat it. I'm not going to tell you that because there are
Right.
other reasons you might choose to eat something that
Sure.
doesn't make you feel good. Cultural
Exactly.
reasons, family
Right.
reasons,
Sure.
mental health. That is so important to acknowledge as well, I think, when it comes to any long-term or holistic dietary approach.
Right, right. No, I agree. And so, how do you really approach that when you're sort of getting people started? Like, what's something that you do with them to really sort of set the ground rules
Yes.
of really what is this about? Because if people are coming for weight loss, right? I have this all the time. People are coming to me for weight loss. And I'm very clear. I don't talk about weight loss. I never have. I never will. It's all about habit change. It's about routines. It's about what is going to be best for you. I teach them the principles of Ayurveda and we shift things that way. I invite them to think about things in a different way, is really what
Mhm.
I'm doing. Right. So,
Yes,
how do
we
you
do
do
the
that?
same thing. It's
Yeah.
exactly what you just said. I know
Yeah.
you're coming to me with weight loss. I respect and I honor that. I do.
Right.
And also, we don't
Hmm.
do weight loss. That's not what the Whole30 is about. Here's what the Whole30 can do. Here's what it does do.
Hmm.
Here's the purpose of the Whole30. Here's what we
Hmm.
invite you into exploring with us in a different way. Give yourself a well deserved break from your preoccupation with the scale and your body weight.
Right.
And then we create resources to remind them all the time that this is not that. We have a Whole30 mindset checklist that we give to
Okay.
everybody when they join the program. And it's a free resource. And it
Hmm.
essentially is just this checklist of reminding people when you find yourself slipping back into that weight loss diet mindset, or you find yourself trying to turn the Whole30 into a weight loss diet by further restricting or counting
Hmm.
calories, or you find these thoughts in your head, well, I can't eat carrots, they're too sugary, or I can't eat bananas, they're too sugary.
Right.
Here is a checklist that we have for you. It's like 4 or 5 bullet points that remind you this is not that. This is why I'm doing Whole30. These are the ways that I'm thinking about
Right.
this 30-day approach to health and diet and my food and my body. And
Hmm.
through the support that we offer and the resources that we offer, we try to continually remind people to come back to what our purpose is so
Hmm.
that they can stay connected and committed through their
Hmm.
program.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, I was wondering as you were saying that, how many people do you find that, they come in for weight loss and they get this mindset sort of, this like reframing of a mindset of how to think about it? How many of those people, you may not know the answer to this, but I'm curious, how many of them say that like this really helped them change how they look at food?
Oh, just about everybody. Just about
Yeah.
everybody. Even when people report their weight loss as part of their testimonial, it
Right.
becomes one bullet point of 20. I
Right.
am in the Whole30 Reddit. That community is amazing. They're always sharing they're so supportive, they're really
Hmm.
respectful, they're sharing their results. It's like an awesome Whole30 community that I don't lead, but I
Right.
participate. And
Right.
anytime somebody shares their Whole30 results, their weight loss may be a bullet point, but there are 10 other bullet points. I'm sleeping better. My energy is through the roof. I haven't had a migraine in 30 days. I had no idea my digestion could be this smooth.
Right.
I have so much more self confidence. My relationship with my spouse is better because we're cooking together more and spending more time
Mhm.
in the kitchen. It becomes one thing, but it's not the thing. And that I
Yeah.
think is the thing I love the most about Whole30 is it's about
Yeah.
food, but it's about so much more than food. And people
Right.
really get that by the end of the program.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if they're listing all the other benefits that they're having, they're definitely seeing that weight loss is a side effect,
A
actually,
byproduct.
a
Yes, it might be.
byproduct. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Of just having a different relationship to food, a different thought process behind food and how it nourishes us. It's sort of this idea that, food is for nourishment. It's not just calories in, calories out, which is what we are so focused on in Western culture. It's such a different perspective in Ayurveda, is that it's really about nourishment and what is nourishing to you in your physical, mental, and spiritual health. And nourishment shouldn't make you feel like crap. Right. And so it's really just, rethinking, how am I thinking about what I'm putting into my body? Is it making me
Yeah.
feel good? Is it not making me feel good? Right. That's a really good
Yes.
place to start from my
And
perspective.
I used to think about food as fuel, right? In my CrossFit days,
Mhm.
I was like, food is fuel. It's about the macros, it's about the calories,
Sure.
it's about the energy, and it is about nourishment. But nourishment is so much more than just the vitamins and
Right.
phytonutrients and minerals,
Exactly.
right?
Right.
People often ask me, do you still use food as comfort? You must never use food as comfort. And I'm like, yes, of course I do. Yes,
Of
I
course.
do. Food can be so incredibly comforting.
Right.
It's not
Sure.
the only tool I
Right.
have, and it's not even my go to tool. But yes, I still do use food as comfort, and I still do use food to express love and
Right.
to to treat myself or to show love to someone else. All of those things I think
Right.
are and should be available. The
Right.
problem comes when that is the only way we know
Exactly.
to show
Right.
love or self-soothe, right?
Mhm.
So, yeah, I
Mhm.
agree.
Yeah, and it's also the awareness again. So if you know that that's why you're using the food, I'm going to to the freezer and I'm having ice cream because I'm feeling really pissed off about something or upset. But if I have conscious awareness that I'm doing that, then it's a different relationship to it, right? I
Yes.
know what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. So it's not just this sort of comfortably numb behavior that I default to, right? Which is, I think, what we're talking about here
That's
is
exactly.
right, is having that awareness of like, why am I doing what I'm doing?
Yes. And
That's the first step
sometimes I don't know about you, but sometimes I behave like a toddler and I'm really
for
mad
sure.
and I am just going to eat the ice cream. And I know it's
Totally,
probably not going to help. And I know that it's probably
exactly.
not going to be the ultimate tool that I need, but I'm mad and I
Yeah,
want the ice cream and I eat the ice
yep,
cream. But there is a conscientious awareness there where I
exactly.
put it down and I'm like, okay, like that didn't help. I knew it wasn't going to help. I did enjoy it though. What are we going to
Yeah,
do now? Now, what are we going to do? And
exactly,
that feels
exactly.
great to me. Yes.
Right, right. Yeah. And the answer isn't I'm going to go get another pint of ice cream. It's like, oh,
No.
that didn't work so well because I'm aware, you know
Hmm.
what? Let me try something that I know that will actually really help me. Let me go for a walk. Let me call a friend. Let
Yeah.
me go have a cup of coffee or a cup of tea with them and talk it out, right?
Yeah.
That's the awareness that comes, I think, is what we're talking about. I love that. And so have you, I know that you have a new Whole30 coming out, but like before this new Whole30, before we get to that, have you along the way in the last 15 years sort of revised or updated Whole30 along the way up until now? Was there any
All the time.
revision? Yeah.
Oh, all the time. I am
Mhm.
constantly updating. So we're regularly updating the program rules based on current science. I've got an entire medical advisory board of RDs and MDs and naturopathic doctors and
Mhm.
mental health practitioners.
Mhm.
And we are always reevaluating the Whole30 program rules. One
Mhm.
example of such is 2.5, I think 3 years ago. We used to have a rule that eliminated MSG as part of the program based on
Mhm.
what we now know was like real bad science and xenophobia. And so, after doing a 2 year research project into the root and history and origins of MSG and the fear behind MSG and Chinese restaurant syndrome, we changed that
Mhm.
rule. And MSG is no longer eliminated as part of the program. And we did a big paper on it and the
Mhm.
history and the background. And so that's one way that the Whole30 is
Mhm.
constantly being updated. We're
Mhm.
always updating the voice and the tone, the language we use. What worked to talk to CrossFitters in 2010 does not work to talk to 55-year-old Carol in Minnesota today.
Right.
And
Right.
so I've had to change, the language quite a bit. And because I've always done all the writing for Whole30, as I've evolved, the program has also evolved. So you'll
Mhm. Mhm.
notice our, language in 2010 or 12 was very tough love, very strict, not
Mhm.
particularly empathetic, and that was because that was how I talked to myself. And over the years, as I've
Mhm.
grown and evolved, my own language has become softer and more empathetic. I have a lot more grace for myself and for others. I'm far more aware of my privilege and other people's lived experience. And you will hear that very clearly reflected in the language that we use and the support and the resources and the tone and voice of Whole30 too.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that. So impressive. I'm really impressed by the fact that you are so open about the fact that, the way that you were writing the Whole30 program before was reflective of how you were talking to yourself and that it has evolved as you've evolved. I think that's really aware. That's like very, very self-aware and really impressive that you can do that
Well, I've
because
done a
there's
lot
not a
of
lot of people who
therapy.
do that.
Shout out to my
As have I.
therapist.
As have I. That's so funny. Okay, so what can we expect in the new Whole30? Let's just jump into Whole30 and then we're going to get to women's health too. But how is this the new Whole30? Because you have a new book coming out soon. Tell us about the changes or like what prompted you to write this new book and let's
Yeah.
kind of go there.
So the flagship book for Whole30 was called The Whole30, and I wrote it in
Mhm.
2014 and it was published in 2015. So it's been 9 years. And that
Sure.
book was hands down our bestseller. It's gone on to sell almost 2 million copies in North America. It was made number one on the New York Times list. Like that was the book. But as with anything, I wrote it 9 years ago. I would not
Mhm.
say a lot of what I said. The book is still good, but some of the words I use, I wasn't as aware of the insidious way that diet culture kind of invades the way we talk about food and we talk
Sure.
about our bodies. The recommendations were far more rigid. It was like, you're going to do it this way. You're only going to do it the best way possible, instead of how I would talk about it now, which is like, sometimes you just let good enough be good enough. And I promise that's good enough. So
Mhm.
I knew I needed to rewrite it. I knew the science needed an update. We had a
Yeah.
brand new plant-based Whole30 program that we launched in
Mhm.
2022 to allow people who don't eat any animal products access to the same experience and support and community and
Mhm.
life-changing benefits of the original Whole30, but in a way that honored their dietary values.
Mhm.
So, I knew it was time to redo it, and I thought it would need an update. And it turns out I just had to rewrite the whole entire thing from scratch. And it was
Mhm.
very cathartic and
Mhm.
it was so much harder than I thought it was. But what I have now is an entirely new book that I think is going to mark a new era for Whole30, the
Mhm.
next hopefully 10 years. That's far
Wow.
more welcoming, far more inclusive, far more respectful of different people's lived experience. The
Mhm.
recipes are far more diverse and use far more culturally significant ingredients in a way that I hope people will find very appreciative. I
Mhm.
think the book in general, the new Whole30, is going to help welcome even more people into the program and give us just another wave of those life changing benefits.
Yeah, that's amazing. And so do you have the plant-based diet in the book also? So the 2 versions are in there?
Yes, yes, and
Okay.
not only are they in there, but they're granted equal weight. So there's the entire original
Mhm.
Whole30, which incorporates animal protein. There's the
Yep.
plant-based Whole30, which includes no animal protein. There's recipes, about 50 recipes for each program, but then I've got a bonus guide that allows you to cross-reference recipes
Mhm.
that work for both programs, that give you access to about another 30 additional recipes, and they
Mhm.
carry equal weight in the book. It's not like, here's the Whole30, and by the way, I guess if you're vegan, here's another side, program that you can do. It's like there
Mhm.
are two paths to the Whole30 and you can pick and choose.
Mhm. Mhm. Love that. Love
Yeah.
that. Being I'm vegetarian.
Y-
Ayurveda's not, you don't have to be
Yeah,
vegetarian, but I am. So I love that that's part of the program because I think, even though, a lot of people will do it just the way that it's always been with animal products in there. I think a lot of people are actually trying to make the change of, lightening up some of the animal products in their diet. And so I think this is great because like you said, it's a cross reference and then they have the option to sort of do both and not feel like they're going to quote fall off or, not be able to complete the Whole30 challenge that they're doing. Right.
exactly. What we're seeing is a lot of original Whole30ers. They did the Whole30 with animal products. They're like, I feel great. This is fantastic. I've got a
Mhm.
baseline, but I'm curious what a more plant forward diet would feel like for me. So they
Mhm.
cross over, they do the plant based Whole30. They rely on soy and legumes and lentils as their primary protein source. And then they compare their experience. And what it really allows people to do is dial in their diets post Whole30, what we call their food freedom, with the plant-based protein sources that they know work the best for them. So now
Mhm.
they're able to incorporate, like, I eat a lot of black beans. I love tofu. I eat so much tofu. Kidney beans don't agree with me, not so much.
Okay.
So now I'm able
Mhm.
to incorporate these plant-based protein sources in a way that lets me have more diversity in my meals. If people want to eat more plant forward, it allows them to do that, and it gives them the same structure and support to go about
Mhm.
their experiment.
That's amazing. And so how have you found that, well, sort of the new Whole30, how are you finding, the results or what the feedback has been from the community of, sort of doing it this new way?
So the book comes out in August, and I'm going to be
Mhm.
really interested, of course, on book tour and everything else to hear people's feedback. I'm getting two things. 90% of the feedback I get when people hear about some of the changes, or I preview some of the language changes, or they've followed me for a long time and they've just organically noticed, is thank you. In
Mhm.
2012, when I first heard about the Whole30, I read some of the ways that you wrote about it and the ways that you talked to Whole30ers, and I thought, this just isn't for me. This
Okay.
isn't the energy I
Mhm.
need, the strictness, the tough love. Like, that wasn't what I needed. I needed an approach that was more empathetic, that was more graceful, that was softer. I didn't think the Whole30 was for me. And now I think that it is. And I'm really happy
Wow.
that you've made these changes because it feels more welcoming. I also hear from some people who have followed me for a really long time who say, I liked the tough love, Melissa. That really
Mm.
resonated with me. I liked the, like, this is not hard. You've done harder things than that. And there's actually a section in the new book where I reflect on the way I used to say some things and the way I say it now. And in the book, I say that is always available to you. You'll never unhear me say, this isn't hard. Of course you can
Yeah.
do this, right? You can keep that if you like it. But
Right.
I want even more people to have access to these same life-changing results that you had in your earliest days of Whole30. And
Mhm.
our language needed to evolve because in my own
Mhm.
integrity, I can't imagine ever talking to someone today the way that I talked to them or myself
Mhm.
in
Mhm.
2010. It's just not who I
Right.
am today.
Right, right. And so are you finding that people are really liking the plant-based version? Are you having a lot of people subscribing to that version, or what's been sort of the fallout of that
Yeah.
plant-based
So
versus animal-based?
we've had, the original Whole30, I think, is still the most popular, but it's hard to judge
Mhm,
because that one, of course, has been around for 15 years, and the plant-based Whole30 is only like 2 years old at this point. But
mhm,
people are loving the plant-based recipes. I mean, whether
mhm.
you eat plant-based 100% or not, they're loving the idea of incorporating more protein sources into their normal meals, so that's great. People who have done the plant-based Whole30 have had a wonderful experience with it because, again, it just helps them dial in the plant-based protein sources that work best for
Sure.
them. And I think
Mhm.
with the new book, we'll be able to attract people who have maybe never heard of Whole30
Yeah.
before because why would they? They're
Right.
vegans and Whole30
Right.
has never had a vegan program, but I think now we're going to attract a whole new audience of people who will
Yeah.
discover Whole30 for the first time through the plant-based program, which I'm so
Mhm.
excited about.
Mhm. And so do you have, plant-based products that are also sort of going hand in hand with this? Because I know you have Whole30 approved products and all that kind of stuff. Is there something for the plant-based,
There are
program?
some. We have a crossover list of Whole30
Mhm.
approved products that also make products that are compatible with the plant-based Whole30. So most of our biggest partners,
Okay.
Nut Pods, Primal Kitchen, Siete, they all make products that are a fit for
Yep.
the plant-based Whole30. We do
Mhm.
also have a few plant-based specific products. So Abbott's is a really good example. They make a very short ingredient list, very simple plant-based protein. They make like a chorizo and
Mhm.
other forms of crumble that I literally have in my fridge right now because they are so
Mhm.
delicious. I cook them up at least once a week. We have some
Mhm.
plant-based protein sources like Sprout
Mhm.
Epic Protein or a pea-based protein that people can use to add supplemental protein to their diets. So, yes,
Mhm.
we do have a cross-reference list on our website as well.
Okay, that's amazing. And so
Yeah,
let's like sort of go to another area because we could keep talking about all of
I
the
know.
things that are Whole30. I find it fascinating. So, I've been doing a lot of work in women's health lately. I'm menopausal now. I was put into menopause from a breast cancer journey last year, early. And so I've been even more interested in this subject. Plus, I'm 52. So everyone around me is talking about menopause and all the symptoms, et cetera. So have you really gotten some feedback from a lot of women and how it's helped them maybe on their perimenopause or menopausal journeys?
Yes.
Just
I am also
Mhm.
50, and my
Okay.
doctor also tells me that my uterus is a rusty old bucket. We're not like 100% sure because my lab work kind of keeps going up and down and back and forth, and I don't really have a lot of symptoms, but I would say I'm probably in
Mhm.
menopause too. I
Mhm.
think our largest growing demographic is older women, Gen X women. And I think it's for
Interesting.
that very reason. We have been
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
neglected
absolutely.
by male doctors and experts and influencers and who don't want to talk about menopause, or when they do talk about menopause they talk about it from a dude's perspective, which I don't want to
Yep.
listen to. You I want to talk to a
Yep.
woman about this.
Exactly.
And obviously we've been all led quite astray by the dangers of HRT, and I think that's starting to come to
Mhm.
light now in very mainstream sources. What
Mhm.
people are finding when they come to Whole30 is, we're not a medical diagnostic program. We
Right.
do not promise to treat any condition, but people do find when they come to the program and really dial in on the foods that work best for them, their symptoms do improve. Their heat
Mhm.
flashes, brain fog, energy levels, and fatigue. And that can
Yep.
go a long way towards working with a specialist to dial in your hormone
Sure.
levels and your specific needs. It's like the low hanging fruit. If you go to
Right.
any doctor who specializes in HRT or menopause and you say, I've done a Whole30, I've figured out the foods that work best for me, this is what my
Mhm.
diet looks like now, you are
Mhm.
so far ahead of the game
Yes.
already.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's I'm really glad that you're getting that feedback and that you're seeing that because I'm seeing the same thing. I mean, I have more and more women in that age group who are following me on social media, who are buying my books, who are listening to this podcast, because they're really sort of like, if I have to listen to another male
Yes.
physician
Yes.
mansplain menopause and perimenopause to me with another male physician rather than
Mm.
talking to a female physician who
Yes.
specializes in menopause and perimenopause. They're like, I can't take it anymore. So that's a whole nother subject for a whole nother
I
podcast
know.
episode. But, I think that it's really important for women to know about a program like this, to understand that like this could really help you with so many of the symptoms that you're having, the insomnia, the hot flashes, the brain fog, all those things that, really, really, eat away at our quality of life. And we're
Yes.
sort of like, we've been programmed to think that we just have to live with it. Like, that's just the way it is, right? In Ayurveda, we say that, once you get to this, sort of transition between what we call adulthood and wisdomhood, we have had so much heat that's accumulated in our bodies because we need that fire to do all the things that we're doing in the middle portion of our life. And as we're transitioning, that accumulated heat is what causes these symptoms. Now, part of that, the remedy that we can use in Ayurveda is dietary, right?
Mm.
That's a big part of it. And so I think what you're getting at with Whole30, from my perspective, as I'm looking at it from an Ayurvedic perspective, is that Whole30 in this way provides, sort of guidelines of how you can maybe use dietary nutrition, food, to help remedy some of the accumulated heat and balance that out that you have at the end of adulthood. So in that menopause time. So I would say to a lot of the people who are listening to this podcast that, if you are looking for, a way to use dietary approaches, and maybe, Ayurveda, I mean, I would love for you to do all the Ayurvedic things, but this I think is a really good introduction into sort of thinking about living consciously. What causes me to have more hot flashes, or what causes me to have more brain fog, right? You'll start to make those connections, which is so important. And that's what we do in Ayurveda. So I would tell all of you who are listening that, if you're looking for a way to maybe sort of gently get into this, or like be in a really big, huge community, because I don't have that huge of a community as you do, Melissa, this might be a really good option for you. So I would really encourage people to do that.
I
Yeah.
appreciate that. And, I think, of course, I'm taking notes now because I'm like, oh, I haven't looked into Ayurveda for menopause symptoms in a while. And there's
Mhm.
probably some additional things I can do, although I have used Ayurvedic principles to adjust my own diet in the past with great success, tremendous
Right.
success.
Yep.
So, yes, if you discover that a food is not working well for you, or the absence of this food leads to a decrease in symptoms,
Right.
whether the response is, "Oh, this is, a very solid Ayurvedic principle," or
Right.
I just know that this food doesn't work well for
Right.
me and I feel better when I don't eat it." It kinda
Exactly.
doesn't matter.
It
Kinda
doesn't
doesn't matter
matter.
because you are
Yeah,
learning to trust
exactly.
yourself and your own body
Right.
and listen to the signals it's sending you, because your own body knows better than any calculator on the
Right.
internet or any advice that you're gonna get from a white dude hosting a podcast.
Exactly. And that's exactly my point, is that, even if you love Ayurveda and you're trying to apply it, I don't care if it's Ayurvedic or not Ayurvedic. I just want you to get to the same place, which is to feel better.
Yes.
And if doing Whole30 helps you become more aware of why you're making the choices you're making and how those choices make you feel, that's Ayurveda from my perspective.
I
So,
love that.
it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, I
So I'm
totally
super
agree.
excited. Yeah, yeah. And so I also want to turn to, I know, a completely different topic, because you've written a really great book on boundaries that I've
Mhm.
actually had quite a few people tell me about, and a couple of friends even share with me. And I just want to know, like, I was so interested that, you on the one side have this entire world of Whole30. I mean, you've got books and programs and foods and all these things. And then you have this book that you've written on boundaries. Like, how did that happen? And
I
tell
know.
me about that. So
Okay, they're
interesting.
They're so closely related, though. They are
Yes.
so closely related because in the early days of Whole30, I
Mhm.
quickly discovered that people really struggle to say no. And in the days of Whole30, it was saying no to the break room pizza or the glass of wine at happy hour or the cake at the birthday party. I don't have
Mhm.
a hard time saying no to that, probably because of my personality and my experience in recovery, but people did, and they needed the
Sure.
language and they needed the permission to say, no, I'm doing this 30-day self experiment with my diet. And, no, thank you. I'm not drinking right now. No, I don't need any cake. I'm perfectly
Right.
happy with what I have.
Right.
And so once people figured out that I was really good at helping them say no to those kinds of things, then they
Mhm.
started coming to me saying, "Okay, but how do I say no to my mother-in-law who's always dropping by without calling? And how do I say no to the coworker who's always gossiping, or my
Mhm.
boss who's always texting me after hours, or the neighbor who always wants me to babysit her kids for free?" So
Mhm.
this really heated up during the pandemic too. In early 2020, especially
Mm.
women, especially moms, all of our lives just bled together, right? Work and
Right.
school and kids and
For
home and
sure.
self-care, and so people needed more than ever the words to be able to protect their own capacity, their mental health, their finances, their energy.
Mhm.
So the idea for the book of boundaries really came from all of the work that I had already been doing within the Whole30 community, helping people set and hold boundaries around food and drink, and then just really naturally expanded into those other areas.
Wow. I love that. I mean, it's all one and the same, right? I mean, if you can set boundaries, well, it's not always one and the same where if you can set boundaries in one area of your life that you're able to do that in other areas. That's definitely not true. But it all comes from sort of the same mindset of, why can't you apply the principles of setting boundaries around what you're doing for your health to other aspects of your life? I think that's what I'm hearing from you.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. Some people do find boundaries with family members easier than boundaries at work or vice versa. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean that you're going to be good at every single area, but the common tenet is my needs matter, my comfort
Yeah.
matters, my feelings matter just as much as anybody else's, and
Mhm.
I have to be the one to set the limits to protect my time and energy and mental health and physical space, because if I don't, nobody else is going to. And I deserve that. I
Mhm.
deserve that protection. And once I
Mhm.
think you have that central kind of foundation, then you can start to see all of the areas in which other people are going to want to take as much as you are willing
Right.
to give. And it will be up to you to say,
Right.
no, this is the line. This is where, I am comfortable. And if you can meet me in this limit, then our relationship can feel really warm and respectful, and it can feel good for both
Mhm.
of us.
Mhm, mhm. And so what are like maybe one or two nuggets you can give everybody as we're talking on this podcast? I always like to, give some really actionable things that people could try even today. And
Yes.
while we're not going to tell you that, we're going to give you all the things for Whole30, you guys will have the links for all of that in the show notes. So if you want to check out the program and get started, you absolutely can. But what are some, thoughts you have around things that people could do for boundaries to help them, especially when it comes to their health or their mother-in-law or whoever,
Yeah.
what would you
I
say?
think one of the most important things you can do is to employ a pause before you automatically say
Mm,
yes to anything. Don't automatically agree to anything. Do you want another glass of wine? Come back to me in a few minutes. Let me think about it. Can
exactly.
we come visit for the weekend? Oh, I better check and see what our plans are. I'll let you know tomorrow. The pause can be a minute. It can be a couple hours. It can be a
Mhm.
few days. But if you employ that pause, that gives you the time and the space to check in with yourself and ask
Yes.
yourself, what do I want? What do I need? How are my feelings? How is my comfort in this
Mhm.
situation? Instead of automatically just responding to other people's demands. If you
Yep.
can just do that one thing, I think that will go so far in helping you
Mhm.
immediately regain some of your time and energy, mental health, and capacity.
I love that. I just did a podcast episode with my good friend, Dr. Thanmeet Sethi, who is another integrative doc. We were actually talking about transitions and sort of how do you deal with change and transitions in life. And the big aha we had was the pause. It's exactly the same thing is that when you're going through a transition, take that pause. So I think this pause is a recurring theme, everybody who's listening, that I really hope that you will really think about how you can use the pause in your life to support your health and support your choices. So whether
Mm.
it's what Melissa's talking about with boundaries, or it was what we talked about a few weeks ago on the podcast with transitions, let's start thinking about how the pause can help us and support our health. So
I
I
like
love
it
that.
when
Thank
the
you for that.
universe is like not subtle like that, right? When,
I know.
the universe just sends you like the message and the message, and finally you're like, okay, all right, this is the
Yeah.
thing I need to do. I like it. It's the
Yeah,
pause.
exactly. I love it. I love it. Okay, so I know that we're coming up on time. So I just want to ask you a couple more questions. And it's really a speed round questions, fun questions for people to get to know you differently, if
I
that's
love it.
okay with you. I
Let's
haven't
do it.
told you what these questions are. Okay. Complete this sentence. Food is
Love. That was the first thing that came to mind. Food is love.
mm, yeah, love for self too. Yeah, I love it. What is one myth about food that we really need to change?
Ugh, that fruit's too sugary. good Lord, people stop talking about reducing food down to its individual components, right? Fruit is vitamins and minerals and phytochemicals and fiber and water and crisp, sweet deliciousness. So let's just
Yeah.
stop reducing food down to its components, please.
Yeah. And good or bad. Yeah, I agree.
Hmm.
100%. What is something that people often get wrong about you?
I think they assume that I'm an extrovert because I do a lot of
Mm,
media and I do a lot of events and I'm very
yep.
comfortable talking to people, but I am the biggest introvert you will ever meet. I need more alone time than anyone I've ever met in my whole life.
Yeah. I think that's so true of so many people who do a lot of teaching and speaking. I'm the same way. People
Mm,
assume that I am an extrovert. I am so not. So I,
yeah.
I totally see that. I think that's a very common misconception. What is something that most people don't know about you?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, I would say, like, I'm a natural blonde, so
Mhm.
that's one thing, but I'm trying to think of I share so much about my life on social media. Like, I talked about that one time I got chlamydia in my 30s. I don't know that there's a lot of things that people don't know about me at this point, to be honest.
Okay.
I think people don't
Yeah.
know anything about my son. That is one thing I will say because I keep him off of social. You'll never hear me
Mhm.
mention his name, and that's very intentional. So, maybe
Okay.
that's one thing is about my relationship with my kid and maybe what a good mom I am.
Okay. Amazing. Amazing. I have no doubt that you're an amazing mom. I can tell. What is one thing that you're really excited about right now?
Ooh. I mean, the new Whole30 book, I'm super excited about, but more specifically, it's summer and the majority of our
Yeah.
snow here in Salt Lake City has melted off of the peaks. And I am now have access to some of my favorite lake hikes at like 10,000 feet without needing snowshoes. Like that just
Amazing.
happened over the weekend. So I think that's what I'm most excited about is getting out into the mountains.
Okay, amazing. What is one thing that you're deeply grateful about right now?
My health.
Mm,
My health. I've had a lot of health challenges in the last few years. I got a concussion 5 years ago. That was just
mm,
a bear to get to a place where I feel like it's manageable. And though I still get flares, my quality of life is better than it has been in a really long time. And never take my health for granted anymore.
mm. Love that. What book is on your nightstand right now?
Ooh, I'm so bad with books and titles because I read so much so fast. But there's a nonfiction book that just came out about raising boys, and I can picture the cover, but I can't picture the title of it. I'll have to send
That's
it to
okay.
you after so you
Yeah,
can include it in
yeah,
the show notes, but it's a book, a
absolutely.
nonfiction book that I'm just starting about essentially,
Mhm.
like, raising boys. My son is 11.
Okay. Okay,
Yes.
amazing. What is a song that you're listening to on repeat right now?
Oh my god, Taylor anything from Taylor Swift's Tortured Poet department, anything, all of it. I'm very into Clara Bow right now, The Smallest Man Who Ever Lives. I could just do the whole thing right now if you wanted, a
Mhm.
cappella, but
Please.
I'm loving that new album.
Okay, amazing, amazing. And so I just have one last question that I always like to ask all my guests as we end this conversation that we've had together. If I offer up the phrase to catalyze healing, what comes up for you?
Ooh, immediately the universe is telling me stillness.
Mhm,
Stillness. And so maybe it is crafting quiet moments to check in with myself and to create space to listen to God or
mhm.
the universe or Mother Nature or your highest power, whatever that looks like. For me, I'm in a period of needing to do less for my own health. But I think stillness comes to mind for me in this moment.
Love it. Melissa, thank you so much for your time. I have loved talking to you. I love all of the synchronicities we're seeing in Ayurveda and Whole30 and the work that each of us does in the world. So I hope
I
that
do
we will
too.
collaborate again soon. Thank you so much for doing this.
I would love that so much, Dr. Avanti. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Anytime.